This is a recording of Hoyt S. Penabaker of 1112 Poxon Avenue, Lansing, Michigan 48910. Hoyt's phone number is area code 517-482-4247. The recording was made by Jim Walkinshaw at the Oldsmobile History Center on October 23, 1989. This is tape number 1 of 3 tapes.
Name first.
I'm going to start you out with your name and your address and your phone number, if you would.
My name is Hoyt Penabaker, Hoyt Stevens Penabaker, and spelled Hoyt Stevens Penabaker, Penabaker.
Okay.
And my address is 1112 Poxon Avenue, Lansing, Michigan,
Okay.
48910.
All right. Your phone?
And the phone is 482-4247.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, maybe if you would just take us back to when you started at the plant, Hoyt.
I started the plant, now I wouldn't give you the exact,
That's all right.
yeah, but I started in 1918,
All right.
right at or before World War I ended, and 1918, and I had just come back here to Lansing from San Francisco.
All right.
I was in a program out there 9 months. It was run by the Marine Engineering under the control of the United States Shipping Board. And if I had worked another 3 months, I could have taken a examination over to Berkeley, at the University of Berkeley, and passed that examination. I would be given the third officer's rating. Now that meant the third officer not in the piloting of the ship, but in the engine parts.
Okay.
In the
Engine room.
engine, yeah.
Well, why did you come to
Because I was in the 18 to 45 draft. I was only 17 when I was out there.
All right.
And you'll maybe wonder why I had done all this when I was 17, but I started in 1915 over to Flint.
Okay.
For working for C.S. Mott.
All right.
And he had several factories in the Buick complex.
Yes.
And which later on Buick bought up. But anyway, I started in working for C.S. Mott. And then, of course, I went out to San Francisco.
Yes.
In this other program.
What were you doing for Mott?
I was learning the trade. First, I learned the machinist trade, and then later on, I learned the tool and die.
All right.
Yeah. But I was, that all was included in this program, too.
Okay.
So that brings me up to the time that I come here in 1918 to the Olds, and that was 71 years ago.
Okay. Yes.
And
Where did you start?
Where did I start?
In the plant.
At that time, the World War I hadn't ended, and but the General Motors had built a building here. We're in Lansing area.
Yes.
Here in Lansing, and if you ever wanted to see that particular building, it's the only one with a posts made of concrete. We're about this big around.
All right.
And it's near the Logan Street Bridge.
Okay.
Yeah. They had just built that building new,
Was that a multi-story building, Hoyt, or was that a single-story?
single-story
That
building.
must have been building 21.
Huh?
That probably was building 21.
I wouldn't say as to that,
Okay.
but that's, at that time, it was the closest one to the Logan Street Bridge, the
All
old
right.
Logan Street Bridge.
Sure.
So, what they were doing at that time, they were moving the machinery from Detroit, from the Northway Engine Company.
All right.
And I'll refer to all this as engines.
Fine.
boss Kettering, he didn't like to refer to it as motors. So,
Okay.
all this, in fact, is on the building next to building 40 there. When they started the Kettering engine plant, we started back in 47. I helped develop that engine, that Kettering engine. And he wouldn't, he says, I'll let you have this engine, but he says, I don't want that referred to as a motor plant. And I don't know whether you've ever seen that plate
Oh,
card.
yes, the nice bright plaque.
Engine plant.
Yeah.
Kettering engine plant.
Yeah.
So anyway, they were moving this machinery from they had bought the Northway engine outfit from Detroit.
Yes.
And they were moving it to this new building because by this time the war had ended. See?
All right.
Yeah, and they had to have something to fill that building because they didn't want to use it anymore for war work.
What was it used for during the war? Do you know, Hoyt?
No, not exactly. No,
all right.
No, I don't. I never got into that.
Okay. It was
because
empty.
I was out there in San Francisco.
Yes. Okay.
And
so they were moving the Northway machinery into the plant when you arrived.
Yeah, and I helped set up that machinery and get this Northway engine going.
All right.
It was known as the Heavy 8.
All right.
And it was made in two sections.
The block, the cylinder block.
The cylinder block, because at that time they couldn't cast a complete block.
All right.
And so they had what they called the heavy half and the light half.
Okay.
They were machined separately, and then they were bolted together, and then the main bearings bored out. See?
All right.
And that
engine was split vertically, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Up and down.
Yeah. And as I say, I helped set up all that machinery. And then after they started in production on this, they made me leader.
Okay.
At that time, they didn't have foremans.
All right.
They had general foremans and superintendents and leaders.
Oh, all right.
And so they made me a leader on there. And
what area did you have?
The area I had, they machined the flywheels on the bullards. You know what I mean by the bullards?
Sure.
Yeah. And can they hear me all right?
Oh, yeah, beautiful.
Yeah. And they had, they had the cylinder heads and flywheels and valve stem guides and 2 or 3 other small parts.
All right.
Yeah. And
do you remember how many people you had working with you?
in this department?
Yeah, in your little department?
Well, there probably wasn't over maybe 12 or 15, something like that. Because they were only making a few cars a day.
All right. Was that a one shift thing?
Yeah.
One shift.
One shift, yeah. And so they used that engine up until they had been buying this engine from Northway Company in Detroit. Well, along about started along 1916.
Yes.
And then after they moved it up, like I just got through telling about moving in this new building. And now whether Oldsmobile bought that engine or whether General Motors bought it outright and give it, I don't know about that. So let me get me over where I started here now.
See, Hoyt, what did they machine? Did they machine crankshafts in that building too? Or was it just?
No, the Michigan Crankshaft Company down on River Street was building the crankshafts.
All right.
Yeah. But now like the castings were made over to Mesquite, the Campbell Wyant and Cannon.
All right.
You've heard of them?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
Yeah. And they were making the castings. As I say, they couldn't cast a complete block.
Right.
So that's the way they got started there. So that brings us up to,
Excuse me again, where was
Sure.
the engine assembly line at that time in that building?
that was where where the tornado was for so many
Yes,
years?
yes.
That's where that was the main assembly.
Sort of
right
at the
there,
east
yeah.
end of the
In that old
building.
creaky floor there,
Yeah.
you walk across
Yeah,
it. And that's where they started the tornado.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so, well, let me get started here. This brings us up to about 1921 or 1920 anyway.
okay,
And that was about the time that Billy Durant had built the building over on the Edward Verlinden Avenue.
yeah,
And Edward Verlinden and Billy Durant were, see, at that time, the stockholders of General Motors had got rid of Billy Durant.
Yes.
Anyway, or either that or he got rid of them, I don't know which. But anyway, he built this nice new building over there, and it was a beautiful place. They had flower beds all around and
yes.
everything.
Yeah.
And so he enticed Edward Linden, who was our general manager, to come over there and be his general manager.
Okay.
And by the way, Raymond's father went over there too.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Okay.
But there was, as I say, there was an exodus from the Oldsmobile
Okay.
over there, and they wanted me to go. I wouldn't have any part of it. But it didn't leave very many in the tool division there. So, but after a few years, when the stock market crashed, come in 1929, that's when Durant ended. Boy, the exodus was the other way.
Oh, yeah.
They're all coming back. So anyway, that brought us up to 1920, and then our chief engineer, Jacks, he designed what they call the Light 8.
All right.
You heard of that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a 47A,
Okay.
and it was all aluminum crankcase.
Oh,
And the only cast iron parts were the cylinders, which were machined separately and then bolted onto this all aluminum crankcase.
so those were two cast iron pieces that
Yeah.
bolted on the aluminum bottom.
That's right.
All
yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was a very good engine. It had the blade and fork rods on the crankshafts,
Okay.
and in fact, is the old heavy 8 that I just got through
Yes.
telling about. They had that too.
All right.
They got that from Cadillac,
Okay.
and
That engine wasn't used in Cadillac, was it, by any chance?
the what?
Was that engine used in Cadillac also? That Northway engine?
No, that didn't have anything to do with the
All right.
with the Cadillac.
All right.
Cadillac, the Cadillac come out in 1902 with a 2-speed Henry Leland
Yeah.
engine.
But the V8 that Cadillac used was not the Northway V8.
No,
Okay.
not nothing to do with each other.
All right.
No, that was I don't know who did design that. So they started building this Light 8 engine, which was a very good engine, and
In the same place that the Heavy 8 was?
yeah, they had at one time you could buy either one of them.
All right.
And they were using two other engines too. They were using the 43A, which was made by Mason Motor or Engine Company in Flint.
All right. Was that a 4-cylinder?
That was a 4-cylinder, a very popular car.
All right.
And they could sell all they could make, and they were an overhead valve and all aluminum
Okay.
piston and all this. But Durant owned the most of the stock in that company.
Oh.
So along as that brought us up to about 1922, 21 or 22, and as I say, they had the two V8s that you could buy either one of them in a car, and then the Oakland company, which later on became Pontiac.
Yes.
They were using the 37A. That was an overhead valve, 6-cylinder engine,
Okay.
and They were using that. You could buy any of those engines. So you start in with some hard times there.
Okay.
And they were planning on doing away with Oldsmobile because they were the last ones to get in the General Motors.
Yeah.
And so they, after Edward Berlin, our manager, went over to Durand, then they bring this ABC Hardy. You ever hear that?
Yes, oh yes.
Yeah. They brought him from Flint over, and he brought back a lot of blueprints and parts and everything for an air-cooled engine, and he scrapped all of these other engines we had.
All right.
So I don't know whether Franklin got after him or not, but Franklin was air-cooled.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that Franklin got after him because he didn't get by with his. In fact, I helped build the first 10 pilot models on that air-cooled engine. They've actually built some of them, and the Chevrolet had some of them out on the road.
Yeah, Chevrolet eventually used them as a car, in a car.
Yeah. So, but after they are experimental and had them out on the road, and they had to quit making them, so he didn't have an engine.
Oh, okay.
So they had to ship him back. He didn't prove out too good. So then our next general manager was Edens.
All right.
You've heard of Edens?
Yes, D.S. Evans.
Yeah. And he started out with just a small 6-cylinder engine.
Okay.
They experimental and already proved to be all right. And then later on, I.J. Reuter, you ever heard of him?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
he got in there and let's see, there was a kind of a mix up there. One of them was taken sick and the other had to take their place. I think it was I.J. Reuter.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't remember now, but because I worked under 8 different managers. And then McEwen come in there too.
Oh, yes. C.O. McEwen. Yeah.
And then the next one is Sherrod Skinner.
Skinner.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And now, so I'm trying to get to you what I was doing. We go back to 1923.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, you must have, excuse me again, you must have came from the production side to the tool side at some point in time. When did you do that?
Well, those days you had to work wherever you could.
I say.
Wherever you could make enough money to buy your, like I was just telling my wife this morning, we got down to 3 7-hour days a week.
Wow.
And then they kept, well, every time you looked at the time clock, you'd see where they cut 10% off your wages. So they got down to 3 7-hour days a week at 45 cents an hour.
When was that?
That was in I just can't remember, but anyway.
In the 20s, Hoyt, or was that in the 30s?
That was in the 30s.
All right, that was during the Depression.
Yeah, that was right after the stock market
All
crash.
right,
Yeah.
okay. Stay with the 20s for a minute. Do you remember what you started, your salary was when you started, or your hourly wage?
It was 50 cents an hour.
50 cents an hour.
And by being a leader, I got another nickel an hour. I thought
Okay.
that was great.
All right.
55 cents an hour.
Uh-huh.
The only time I had to work is if somebody wasn't there. So your leader had to be able to run any machine.
All right.
And otherwise, you was just like a foreman. You had your desk here and everything.
Yes.
So
Did you have 8-hour days or 10-hour days? How long were your days?
they were, I think the most of them, when they were running good, it was 9 hours.
All right.
Yeah, and sometimes 5 days a week. So
Okay.
it made those small hourly rates a little bit better than what.
Sure.
Yeah.
Did you get paid overtime if you worked overtime? How did that work?
I think we got time and a quarter.
All right.
We didn't get no time and a half. We got
All right.
time and a quarter. And I was trying to work another one in there. you heard the Viking?
Yes,
Yeah,
29.
yeah. This Jacks, I think.
Arcade Jack.
Arcade Jacks,
Yes,
yeah.
uh-huh.
I'm quite sure he designed the Viking,
All right,
and which was a very good car, but it was timed wrong.
yes.
When it was idling, you'd swear that it was missing a cylinder, but it wasn't so. You know, I talked with people that worked on the proving grounds down at Milford,
Yes.
drove them. They said they couldn't ask for a nicer car, a better car.
Uh-huh,
Do you remember Frank Bodine?
yes,
He was one at that time.
Uh-huh.
He was one of the ones that drove cars down there. Later on, he had a better job, but he told me that. In fact, he was my neighbor there on Logan Street. So they built that Viking. Did you say 29?
1929 and 30. Uh-huh.
30, yeah.
Yeah,
And but they didn't build it very long.
No.
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 So then they come out with a straight eight.
okay,
Straight eight, and in fact, they built the straight eight for LaSalle, Cadillac LaSalle.
oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
the Cadillac LaSalle used a straight eight, and the straight eight was it was a wonderful car. It had a device on it that would cool the motor oil in the summer and heat it in the winter.
Interesting.
Yeah, it worked with the thermostat.
Yeah.
I just don't remember now just how, where the thermostat was. I know the thermostat was located on the pump. It wasn't up on the radiator. It was, and so that brings us up to,
Take me back into the 20s again, if you would, Hoyt.
yeah, I will, because you want to get back to
I wanna know-
1923.
Yeah, I want to know what you were doing.
Yeah, okay. As I say, when they done away with all these engines and everything, and this they shipped this ABC Hardy back where he belonged.
Right.
Don't say I don't.
No,
Don't tell Helen early, because she thought he was all in.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but anyway, I've talked with her on that. But anyway, I had to have a job.
Okay,
So they were starting the parts machine shop, pass model machine shop. Do you remember that?
no, I don't.
Yeah. Well, they were starting that down in the old brick building that was originally Old's assembly building, or where he started. So I took a job down there and helped get several things going there, like I did with the heavy eight in the first place.
Okay.
You know, it was to build these parts, be able to build anything that they wanted built, you had to have the proper machinery.
Yes.
So we had to set up the gear cutters and all that stuff. So I worked. Do you remember Frank Rodemaster?
No.
No. Well, he was a foreman there at that time, and so I worked there up until. I worked there up until World War II.
Oh, quite a long time.
Yeah, a long time.
Did you stay right there in that same building, that same area?
Yeah.
All that
Well, of
time?
course, we moved that department several times.
Oh, you
we
did?
moved them over in 64, or the building that way from 64.
62.
62, yeah.
Okay, the old parts-
Yeah, we moved from this brick building, what I was just telling you about,
Yeah.
over into 62.
All right.
We were there a good many years. I can't explain just how many. And then later on, after 64 was built, you know, where the experimental is,
yes.
we occupied the first floor there.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And that was where I first met Raymond's father.
Uh-huh.
We had we'll have to go back a little bit here now.
That's all right.
There's several thousand people, or several million, I should say, that are riding around on automatic transmissions that's got no idea how they come about or anything. Have you ever had that explained to you?
Sure. Go ahead.
Yeah. When the Ransom Olds came out, first dash model, he had he never. Oh, I shouldn't touch that.
All right.
Yeah.
Why don't you shut off the
Yeah, I'm
microphone?
a little nervous again. Well, anyway, he had the he had the curved dash model, but he didn't have an engine, and he had several different engine companies building him engines, like the Briscoe. You've heard of the Briscoe?
Yes.
Made over to Jackson and I guess Detroit too, and Dodge Brothers and several of them, but he didn't like too many of them. Along in the picture comes this Henry Leland. You heard of him?
Yes, oh yeah.
And I think that he probably was the greatest mechanical genius that ever entered the automobile business, because he had started out as he's a graduate engineer, by the way, and he had worked before the Civil War, he had worked in these arms factories, and he was the father of the interchangeability of parts. That was, and then he helped start the Brown and Sharp company.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So but he come to Detroit and started a business of his own, building engines, and this was a planetary engine, 2-speed Leland engine. You know what I mean by the planetary engine? Yeah.
Bigger case, yeah.
Yeah. In other words, you had a bunch of gears revolving around a bunch of gears, same as our Earth does around. Anyway, it was known as a planetary engine. And let's see. So Oldsmobile used that in his production of the curved dash model, and it worked out. It was fine because you had 3 pedals. You know how they work, yeah. And the first pedal is you shell it over and low and then let it back, and when you let it back, being high. And the fact is, Henry Ford used that on his Model T.
Yep.
And Henry Leland then started the Cadillac, 1902 Cadillac, and he used it on that. So that brings that part up to date, and then we're back in the parts machine shop.
Okay.
Well, after our engineers, along with General Motors engineers, had designed what they call the first, what was
The
it?
automatic safety transmission.
Huh?
The automatic safety transmission.
Yeah, that was automatic, built in 1936, 37, and 38. And very good. Everybody liked them, but you had to use a clutch to get started.
All right.
You didn't have your fluid drive like the later the Hydromatic. Yeah. So in building the cars at that time with this automatic transmission over on the assembly line, every once in a while they tested every one of them separately. They had to. They would get one at exactly 48 miles an hour on your testing machine. It would holler like hell. Or I shouldn't use that word here in the tape.
But it would squeal or something.
Yeah. And so they threw it out. So after they stopped making the automatic and went to making the Hydromatic, that's when Raymond's dad come in. to this little place over we had. I'll get to that. They had accumulated around 7,000 or 8,000 of those that they had thrown out, these automatics.
Mm-hmm.
So the management says, well, we're not going to scrap all them. They got to be something done. So we set up a testing machine, engine, to test them with, the speedometer, all this and that. And when we test there, we'd see that 48.
Okay, already.
Okay.
Had to test them all anyway.
Yeah, yeah. So that they says your parts machine shop has got to do that. Well, now we tried to find out just why that noise was, and we went back to Buick. See, Buick made this transmission.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
All right.
The Olds didn't have the expertise
All right.
they had certain machines there, so Buick built a new building and built that, and so we went to the Buick experts trying to find out why they had that noise at 48 miles an hour. Well, that's your baby now. And they just didn't know, see?
Uh-huh.
So what we would do with this certain gear that done that could be turned over. I forget just what angle.
Yeah.
It was one of those types of
Sure.
spiral gears that could be turned over, and you'd have the same thing every time. So we would try that. Once in a while, we get one that would stop that noise.
Okay.
But still, they wasn't satisfied. They wanted to know why they couldn't take any gear and put in there. So I was, there was 2 or 3 of us working on them. Raymond's dad hadn't come there yet because they hadn't brought the hydromatic.
Mm-hmm.
So one day I thought, no, I'll just take some Prussian blue and coat the back end of that spiral tooth and just really brush that off, just see what that'll do. And that done the trick right there. That got rid of just that, well, you was taking a little of the gear off, using the Pippin file. So that solved that. And then
You just had to remove a tiny little bit of the tail of the gear?
that's right. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah, just a little bit of the tail.
Uh-huh.
And probably wouldn't be over maybe a couple tenths or something like
Isn't that interesting?
So that solved that problem. Then of course we brought in another straight engine to check this department we had on this over here was where his dad works on the hydromatic.
Yeah.
This little department.
Yeah.
We had to get set up, and so that got rid of that noise.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened was that anybody that had a automatic that a lot of times you'd see where they'd run hot. When you heat oil, it turns to varnish.
Yes.
And so them would come back in there and they would overhaul that and put any necessary parts in it and it needed and give them a rework like I was just telling you about it,
Yes.
practically a new one.
Yes.
And do you know how much that would cost them? $75.
Oh, really? Oh.
Now you'd be 7,500.
Right.
Well, it's all costing them to trade their old engine back, their old automatic transmission back in and get one that was okay.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So, of course, then we had our own little tool room there in the parts machine shop,
Okay.
and then of course, that's where I worked out of. And we had a tool maker and a die maker. Well, both of us was tool and die. I had learned quite a lot about the die making, and mostly all tool making though. So We had a nice tool room. We had very nice machinery and everything. And did you ever hear of Bob Viancore?
No.
No. Well, anyway, he was an old die maker, and he couldn't get along with anybody else, so they shoved him on me. No, he couldn't. They didn't like him in the main tool room, and they didn't like him here. He just couldn't get along with anybody. They called him cocky because he was cockeyed. Never got that straightened out or anything. You'd see him working, machining a line here, and he'd be looking at it like that. And anyway, him and I got along pretty good after I told him where he could get off at. They got him over there. Now I'm getting ahead of my story. Now I'm talking about post-war.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we had our own tool room there, and
Hoyt, could that tool machine cylinder blocks? Could you do blocks?
no, the tool room.
Yeah, your little service tool room.
Oh, that was for the same as like the building 40. tool
Okay,
room.
we do everything.
Yeah. No, out in the area there in that department,
Yeah.
we had all kinds of other grinders and milling machines and all
So
that.
you could rework a cylinder block.
Oh, yes.
If you had.
Yeah, fact is they did.
You did.
Oh, yeah, they had an outfit they could hone or bore
All
or
right.
anything. Yeah, they had a machine. They had pretty good. They're all old machines.
Yeah.
Fact is, the only machinery we could get a hold of was something that production wouldn't use any. Then we would rework it a little bit and get by with it. We had quite a lot of compliments. I don't know whether you remember. Now, let's see. Do you remember Burton Adams?
No.
Well, he was, the Adams brothers.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was their father.
Oh, okay.
And at that time, he was he was head of the central inspection. You know what I mean by the central inspection? And he used to come over there to check on castings and things over in the parts machine shop. And of course, I knew him through his son Bob there, and like I said, he told me, he says, I don't see how you get by with all this old machinery. And he says, you're doing precision work. He says, that grinder right there, he says, is grinding about 40 pistons an hour, where he says over in the main tool rooms, they had a piece like that, they'd spend a whole hour doing one of them. Well, I says, it's merely getting it set up right and everything like that. And so that more or less brought us up to World War II.
But I'm going to take you back just for a minute again.
Yeah, okay, anytime you
I
want.
want you to go back to the time when we were making the V8, the Northway V8. Were we making any other kind of engine at that time, or just that V8?
We were making the 47A, the one with the aluminum crankcase. And you know where they made that aluminum crankcase?
No, where?
Over in the plant 2. Plant 2 originally here. Where are we here anyway?
Over that way.
Yeah. Plant 2 originally was an aluminum foundry during
the Ryan Bone Foundry.
Huh?
The Ryan Bone Foundry.
Ryan, right, yeah.
And that made aluminum parts?
Yeah, yeah, they made aluminum parts for, not only for Oldsmobile, but for all General Motors or anyone. It was quite a foundry.
All right.
And still a dirty looking old place.
But they were making that a crankcase then for us, that aluminum crankcase.
Yeah.
All right.
And machining it.
They were machining it too?
Yeah, we were machining it.
We were machining.
Yeah, we bought all machinery.
Uh-huh.
That's the first time I got acquainted with Ed Berlinden. He started that light V8, and this before he got hooked up with Billy Durant again, and when they moving this beautiful machinery in to
All right.
machine that with and everything, aluminum, and he would come right out in the factory and roll up his, throw his coat off, and roll up his sleeves and work
Okay.
with you on it.
Oh, yeah.
He was a very, very good man,
Yes.
even if he did go wrong with with what's his name, with the Duran.
Can't fault him for that.
Yeah, well, in fact, I shouldn't say too much about this, but if you would go back in the annals of Oldsmobile, and what do you call this tape? Not like that, but it keeps rolling around up in the library. Well, anyway, you could find out where
Microfilm.
microfilm. That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah, yeah. And you could, and also as a book that they keep locked up from that too. You could find out where it was said. Now I wouldn't want to, I can't prove this or anything. It was said that he claimed that Oldsmobile or General Motors owed him bonus, and they didn't want to pay him. So he writes himself out a check for, well, it would be a small amount today,
Right.
10,000, and absconded over to the Durand. And that I remember when the State Journal had a big flaring page and front page about the Oldsmobile General Motor absconding to, so how true that was, I don't know. Yeah, but anyway, he left and went over there.
Right.
And they named the street for him over
Yes.
there too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we were only making then the heavy V8 and the light V8.
Yeah.
We weren't making any other engines
You know,
at the
we
plant,
wasn't making the 43A four-cylinder Mason engine.
or the 6-cylinder.
Or the six-cylinder
All right.
made by Pontiac, which is, it was Oakland at that time.
Yeah. Were we making axles, rear axles?
Oh, yes.
We were making.
Oh, yeah, I'm glad you mentioned
All
that.
right.
Because I have a bunch of photographs, pictures, and Helen has them too.
All right.
And she can show them to you anytime. And they're just like me. When the shareholders of General Motors found out that there was certain people trying to get rid of Oldsmobile, that's what I'm talking about, back in 1923.
Yes.
They says, well, we don't want no part of that. We want a photograph of every department. So they went ahead and photographed every department, and Oldsmobile was making like axle shafts for different. See, Billy Durand had accumulated quite a few plants, like the Grant and small ones like that, Peerless and a bunch of them, and they were making parts like steering knuckles and axle shafts and all that. And these pictures, and then they got these pictures together, or they would go to a department and they get everybody in the department all in a group and take their pictures, see. Well, they sent these pictures back to whoever was I think the DuPonts, I think, were the biggest stockholders at that time. And anyway, they sent it back to the proper ones. And they says, oh my gosh, if they're doing all this work, why discard them? So that's the only thing that saved the Oldsmobile. Otherwise, the Oldsmobile was ready to go kaput.
I'll be darned.
Yeah. And then it was just through the taking of those 1923, the only time that the Oldsmobile had ever taken pictures of every department. Yeah. Every department. Yeah. And well, in fact, everybody for that matter, because that included the office and experimental, everything like that. So that's the only thing that saved the Oldsmobile. Otherwise, you and I wouldn't have been working there. So.
Do you remember where we were making the axles, Hoyt? Which end of the plant, east or west?
Not not too much. Did you ever hear the French brothers?
No?
Joe French? He was a general foreman of that.
How about sheet metal? Were we making sheet metal things?
Oh, yes, yeah, oh, yeah, they had the sheet metal department.
Okay, bodies?
No, the bodies were made by Oldsmobile up until, was after the Durant went to flop.
All right,
They, General Motors bought that
right.
building.
Prior to then, where were the bodies made?
They made it at Oldsmobile.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you ever get into the body plant?
You mean to work?
No, just to see what was going
Oh,
on?
yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was acquainted with some of the very first ones that worked at the Olds, like Charlie Blades, you heard of him.
Yes.
Yeah, he was a good friend of mine, Charlie Blades was. And Emil Roost.
Yes.
Emil Roost, he's the one that they let work 50 years so that the General Motors could say they had a 50-year man. Otherwise, they couldn't have done it.
Yeah.
Not Charlie Weaver, it was Weaver anyway. Anyway, I got a list in the book. I didn't bring it with me today, but anybody could see it any time. And I remember going to the Charlie Blades birthday party, but anyway, I was trying to think of the number of years. It was 1939.
Oh, yes.
So that would be 38 years, yeah. It was 38 years, but it was held in 1939 at the Hotel Olds, up in the Blue Room at the Hotel Olds. And I got to meet some of the, now at that, let's see, no, there's another party I'm thinking of. This party, Lauren Dickinson was or he was a governor of Michigan at that time. And Knutson, did you ever hear of Bill Knutson?
Yes. Yeah.
Bill Knutson, he was the head of the General Motors at that time.
Right.
And you ought to hear him talk. He come up the hard way. He says, you folks think you got it hard now. He says, you ought to have seen when I was coming up, somewheres in Pennsylvania. They were, had a big stamping machine, or I don't know, it was a punch press anyway. Yeah. And they'd stripped a couple teeth off from it. And then they didn't dare shut that machine down because they'd lose that production. So they bored holes in there and made makeshift teeth.
Oh, yeah.
To keep that going, so they didn't have to shut it down. He said that they had to do that in order to keep the plant going. Yeah. And he's quite a guy. So, and then of course Emil Roost, he was an old striper.
Okay.
Yeah, he worked in the carriage works before the automobile business, striping. They used to stripe.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, yes. Yeah. And of course he knew paint too. But they were the two oldest.
Did you ever get a chance to talk with those people about what happened in the very early days?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Oh, gosh, yes. That's what I should have started right this whole thing on there, because I figured I was very fortunate in coming to the Olds at the time when they had men there that, I'd say they were all in their 30s to their 40s, maybe. Yeah. Well, I don't know what old. They had been at the Oldsmobile all the preceding years from the time Ransom Olds started, 1900.
Yeah.
Of course, he actually started in 1897.
Right.
And of course, you got one of them things down in the museum there, but they're just the things. Was that steam or was that?
That was gas.
Gas, yeah, yeah.
Describe any of the things? Could you remember any of the discussions you might have had? How things were at the very start?
Well, one thing, uh, there was quite a, there wasn't a very, very friendly atmosphere between the people that had their money in Olds at that time.
Oh.
Can you remember?
Smith.
Smith, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Between them and Ransom Olds, he wanted to keep on building the curve dash model, and they wanted to go to build a bigger car.
Right.
But what has always been a kind of a mystery, well, it was after he, in 1904, after he went over to the Rio, then this Smiths, they sent a old Scout across.
Right.
Yeah. Now, if they didn't like old Scout, why'd they do that?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Isn't that odd?
Yeah. So that brings us into another phase of this uh, curve dash model. Well, anyway, from a time Olds left, as I say, they went to building some nicer cars. You got some of them over there in the museum, but they just didn't sell because the people didn't have the money those days to buy that type of car. So let's see. What was the name? What was the name of the big one? Was it
Limited.
Huh? Limited, yeah, built 1910. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. That was about one of the last big ones they made.
Mm-hmm.
But between 1905 and up until maybe 19 later, let's see,
Probably 12 or maybe.
12, yeah, up until then, they built these high-class cars.
Yeah.
And I don't know too much about them. Well, I know where the engines were made. The Seeger, you heard of the Seeger engine?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They built most of the engines.
The engines were made there. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And so.
The Seeger plant, the old building was there when you came, wasn't it?
Yeah.
What was that being used for when you arrived? You remember?
No, but I remember before I went out to San Francisco on this program I've told you about.
Yes.
I worked with a fellow over to the Rio in the Rio tool room that had come from the Seeger Engine Works. I can't think of his name now, but he held a pretty good job over there. But I never got to go over there while they were, and so.
Did you get into the old building before it was torn down?
No, I didn't. Did the Olds buy that?
Yes, eventually. In 1919, they bought it.
Yeah. No, I don't think I ever got over there. There was another building there that we used for, well, I'll get into that. I'm getting into too many at once. I want to finish this, automatic transmission.
Okay, go back to the transmission.
Yeah. You see, they sent Old Scout across.
Yeah.
And Old Steady too, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. And after it got out there, they didn't pay any more attention to it. So now this is something that Helen don't have. They didn't record it.
All right.
I talked with her once before, and she hardly believed me. But she didn't say so, but I could see that she thought I was kind of making it. Anyway, it wasn't recorded at the plant.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why she was mystified. Let's see, 27 years later, from the time it made its run. The old, wherever this old Scout was, and some say it was in a barnyard out in Oregon or somewheres, they went and got it. You ought to have seen it when they brought it back to make another run for advertising purposes, yeah. And so I got in on that too.
Restoring it?
Yeah, restoring it, and they got a hold of the Dwight Huss that originally drove it out there. And he was a superintendent down to Hupmobile, I guess, in Detroit. But anyway, they hired him to come back and rerun that. So he made that rerun. Well, that's twice that the old Scout had been across there. Well, now up comes the third time.
Okay.
And this will be more disbelief. But you remember the Freedom Train?
Yes.
Yeah, well, old Scout made the trip across on that.
Okay.
So that's 3 times that old Scout went across there.
Yeah.
But as I say, in 1932, that'd be 27 years later from the time it made the original trip, I was going to tell you something else now, but that's kind of slipped my mind. Go ahead and ask
Okay.
it.
All right. Hoyt, what was going on then as you approached the Depression? Where were you working? You were still in service parts.
Yeah.
And then as the Depression happened, what happened in the plant?
Well, everything happened. There would be layoffs, and of course, you didn't get paid when you got laid off in them days.
Okay.
No, there was no like they know the state didn't pay.
No unemployment.
Yeah, and they didn't have. Of course, they didn't have a union then either. As I was telling you just shortly a minute ago, there we got down to 3 7-hour days a week.
Okay.
45 cents an hour.
All right. You were back to less than what it was when you started.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, they didn't make any bones. They didn't have anything to quarrel about because I say they didn't. There was no union at that time. No, there's one thing I want to mention. There was a very, very good relationship between the Oldsmobile and the unions after the unions did come in.
Okay.
There's a very good relationship. Right now, twice a year, they have a party over at 652 Hall, and there's probably about this is tool and die makers. That's not
not the hourly, the workers, the line workers.
Yeah, and it's put on by the tool and die makers that's working, and for the tool and die makers that's retired. And I imagine probably sometimes they get as high as a couple hundred there.
Very nice.
Yeah, and you'll see foremen, superintendents there. And I can remember when they first started the union, if a foreman would go along on Clare Street there and look sideways, and the management would find it out, and I don't know what they would do, but they didn't like it. I mean,
really?
But now things are different.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. As I say, they've always had a very good relationship between the unions and the management. Yeah.
Did that change any from like when you started in 1918? How was the relationship in those days between?
There was no unions.
No, I know, but between management and labor.
They were very good.
Okay.
Yeah, they were very, very good. There was a few instances where somebody would get laid off or maybe even fired.
All right.
That had a family. They should have had this job, but this foreman, being a certain relation or a certain
Religion?
religion, that's the word I'm
Okay,
trying.
all right.
Certain religion would kind of favor.
Oh, yeah.
I seen that happen, and it didn't happen too much, but that has happened. Of course, after the unions got in, they couldn't do that because
Yeah.
it went by seniority, but that would,
Who did the hiring in those early days? Was it the foreman?
have you ever heard of Doc, huh, the, he was, he had about a half a dozen different positions.
Okay.
He was supposed to be a doctor. I don't know whether he was a real doctor or not, but they called him Doc. He had charge of all the uh, first aid stations around through the plant.
Mhm.
And he was also he done the hiring,
All right.
and uh, anyway, he held several jobs.
All right.
And of course, there wasn't too many people working there when I first went there. Probably only about 1,000 people.
All right.
Yeah. Doc, we'll have to ask.
It wasn't Gunderson, was it?
No,
No,
Gunners.
it was later. Yeah.
Later, yeah. No,
But
that name is familiar.
the foreman didn't have anything to do with the hiring process at that time?
Well, he had to do with this.
This is a recording of Hoyt S. Penabaker of 1112 Poxon Avenue, Lansing, Michigan. The recording was made by Jim Walkinshaw at the Oldsmobile History Center on October 23rd, 1989. This is tape number 2 of 3 tapes. Okay. How did the foreman relate to the hiring process?
He would either send this man down in the department to talk with the foreman, or he would have the foreman come to the office. And the office at that time was right there at the end of it, right there on Elm Street. Yeah, you probably don't remember that old building they tore down.
With the little pointy roofs, had a peak point on the front?
I think it is. That was before before they built the main office buildings, like where Helen worked. And he was there at that time. Now, they would either bring the foreman, have the foreman come up and talk with this fellow that wanted to be hired, or vice versa, have him, somebody take him down to the department.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's the way they worked that. Gosh, I wish you remember what Doc. Anyway, we'll have to ask Helen. She knows.
She may remember.
Oh yeah, she remember real well.
Well, did that, how did the foreman manage people during that time? Did they listen to people's comments? How did you feel about a foreman in those days, the early days?
Well, as I say, when I first started there, they didn't have foremen. They had general foremen and superintendents and leaders.
How did you feel about the general foreman?
Well, no, they're good relationship. Yeah,
All right.
See if I can remember Jack Rummins. You probably heard of him, and I can't think of that. Then there was one that come from Continental and Muskegon.
All right.
And there was one by the name of Church.
Louis Church.
Louis Church. You remember him, do you?
The name, yeah.
Yeah. He. I'll have to tell you a side story about. Well, let's do it right now then.
Sure.
With Louis Church. After they done away with the parts and machine shop, that I was telling you about, they done away with that and shipped it off over by Chevrolet or somewhere. Yeah. I had to have another job, see. So I wanted to get in the main tool room back in there.
Uh-huh.
And I had worked there before. I wanted to get in there, and so I went to Jim Reinbold. You remember him? He was a superintendent of the main tool, that
Okay.
Jim Reinbold. And he says, Josh, he says, Penabaker, I got tool makers walking all over themselves and nothing to do with it. But he says, we're badly in need of one over in the Kettering plant. And this was in 1952.
All right.
And he says, I want you to go over there, and he says, I'll call one of the foremen and have him come over and talk with you. But he says, I want you to take your toolbox and go right down to the other end of the plant and stay there. He says they're having all kinds of trouble in the rocker arm department and other places down there.
Mm-hmm.
Stay down there. So now what I'm getting around to Church.
Louis Church.
Yeah, Louis Church at that time was superintendent of the Kettering plant.
Okay.
And I had worked with him over when when we first started over there in the heavy 8 engine. So we had to follow that he worked in the tool room, but he had to go out on different jobs in the area and like so that. And we had, at that time, they had the rocker arm shaft.
Yes.
You remember that?
I remember that.
Yeah, they don't have that anymore.
No.
You know? And you ever see that progressive die they made to take care of that?
For making rocker arms.
Yeah. So this, they had 4 or 5 straightening presses to straighten those rocker arm shafts, and it was quite an expense because they had to be straightened when they were run through the centerless grinder. So I'm not trying to make this up. I'm just trying to get this straight. I got a call one more. See, we had to change shifts at that time. I had enough seniority. If it'd be the last few years, I'd been all right. But at that time, it didn't matter. You had to take your shifts, your change. Yeah. So I just got up and sat down to breakfast. I'd worked in the evening before, and I got a call from main tool room that they were just about out of rocker arm shafts. And this man I was telling you about, he had talked them into through a suggestion to buy a machine down in St. Louis, Missouri. It was made, I can't remember the name of it now. It was a straightening outfit. And that would straighten 200 or 300 of them an hour, you know, where they do away with all these presses. So they gets this press brought in there, and this fellow that turned in the suggestion didn't know how to run it. So I being down that end of the department, I had a lot of time that I didn't have anything to do, and so I fooled around with it, and I got it just so it was right. Not wanting to brag or anything, but I got so it straightened those rocker arm shafts just right. And so then it come about that Jim Reinbold wanted me over in the main tool room. And so I gets this telephone call that they were just about out of rocker arm shafts, and Louis Church wouldn't let any of the other men, if Penabaker wasn't there, don't let any of them run that machine. And then the superintendent of the assembly line was hollering for rocker arm shafts. So I went and straightened it out for him, and I told him, I said, you ain't going to get me to come down here after losing my sleep all night. So I was at Louis Church, had told these foremen not to let anybody run that machine, or adjust that machine, rather, but Penabaker. Well, that Penabaker had already gone over to the main tool. So I told the head of the tool gauge and fixture department, or the foreman there. I told him, I said, you got to get some of your men on each shift, three shifts. You got to get some of them to learn how to set that machine when it gets off. Very delicate. I don't know if you've ever seen anything like that work or not. It was a great big hardened rollers, and you had to get the right angle, see?
Right.
And boy, when you got that fixed up, you could shoot them rocker arm shafts through there just as fast as you could feed them, see? So that's what I was getting after then. And then, of course, that same department down there, that rocker arms, they were probably, I'd say, as high as 15 or 20 men working that one department. And after they got this progressive die going, one man run the whole thing. See, they'd start out with a piece of sheet metal about the size of my hand there, and feed it in there, and just one stroke of that press. Every time that press went up, it moved that piece, and it even put that little ball socket in there, But another thing that show you how stubborn they can be. Some of the engineers. Was you an engineer? You all. Well, anyway, right down to the very end of that department, the carrying engine plant at that time, they had a whole long row of centerless grinders right across the fence. It was a great big presses.
Right.
And here was this poor old guy that he was very good. He knew his centerless grinders, and and of course they would feed themselves across there. And he had a limit of 2/10, I think, or something like that on the piston pins and rocker arm shafts, and he was trying to hold them. And every time the old presses would come down, it'd make make that jump. And you suppose they would change that? I went to the head ones several times and told them that they should get those centerless grinders. In fact, it eventually did.
Yeah, they moved them out of there eventually.
Yeah. They moved them back up in there. But that's what you got to work with,
Well, Hoyt, take me back into the 30s a little bit again, if you would. What, as we went through the Depression, how did, and the Union happened right there in the middle someplace, in the 35 or 36 or somewhere in there.
I think 37.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so were you there as that was happening too? And what was going on there? Why did that happen?
Well, you see, that was General Motors. They controlled that. That wasn't just a plant by itself.
Yeah.
Of course, you had the option of joining the union.
Okay.
If you want to, or you didn't have to join it. Later on, when they had what they call it, not full house, but plant wide.
Yes. Yeah.
But in the beginning, you could join the union if you wanted to, and if you didn't want to, you didn't have to.
Were the people that were forming the union in Lansing, did we have any organizational things happen while the union was forming? Out in the plant, do you remember things happening?
Not too much. They had a couple parades here at different times.
Okay.
And Do you remember, did you ever hear of Jim Bowden?
No.
Well, Jim Bowden, he was a tool maker and he worked in the main tool room. And he's the one that drafted our pension plan.
Okay.
You and I probably wouldn't be getting a pension today if it hadn't been for him. Because he's been dead several years. Well, his son worked there in the main tool room, was a foreman there.
Yeah.
But Jim Bowden, he come from Scotland. And, he designed for the head unions the basic part of what the unions are today.
Yeah.
And as I say, we might not have a union today if it hadn't been for him, or a pension rather.
Okay.
We'd have a union probably, but a lot of the benefits was through his effort. And
When you first came in 1918 and in the 20s, there was nothing for a pension or nothing for retirement?
no benefits of any kind.
No benefits.
No. As I say, when you got laid off, you got laid off. They was telling about 3 7-hour days a week at 45 cents an hour, and I'll figure that out.
Yeah.
And
How did they figure out who was going to get laid off?
well, it was usually in general that they got laid off.
The whole plan?
Yeah.
All right.
And I know I was buying a home at that time, and I went to the lady that held the mortgage, or I had to make the payments to and I told her, I says, I'll have to give up. I says, I can't make it. Well, she says, all you got to do is, she had a drawer there full of, she quite a rich lady, see, and she had a whole drawer full of, what am I trying to think of? Well, anyway, they were different.
Like the contracts?
Contracts, that's what I'm trying to think of,
Okay.
yeah. She says, all you gotta do is pay the interest. She says, that's all I care about. Says, you can pay the interest, and that amounted to something like $20 a month or something.
Oh,
Yeah, because real estate was cheap then.
Yeah, better.
Yeah. And so let's see, where we at?
Oh.
We just finished up on this.
What happened during the war?
Get back to. Did you ever hear of Maynard Murray?
Yes.
Ken Mix?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I think they're still alive yet.
Ken Nix is, I think. Yes.
Yeah. Does he have an apartment down on Moore's River Drive?
I don't know where
Yeah,
Ken
yeah,
lives. Yeah.
Well, anyway, when we were first starting that parts machine shop back in 1923, this Maynard Murray, he come from car shops in Battle Creek.
All
He was a
right.
good mechanic.
All right.
And he worked with him. And then after he got up in the office. I think he was in the there I go again. Well, anyway, he was the head one in that office when I got those automatic transmissions going.
Okay. Yeah.
And he thought that was great.
All right.
And so when the World War II come on,
Yeah.
1941, you see the only parts that they built or that they made of that 20 millimeter gun was the tube. You know what I mean by the
Yes,
tube? The
yes.
tube and the receiver body and the bolt.
Okay.
And there were three quite important parts of that gun. And So they had made Maynard Murray superintendent of the gun plant. And he remembered to be working on these automatic transmissions.
Mm-hmm.
So he got a hold of me and he says, I want to hire you to be more or less a kind of an inspector. Anything you see that's wrong with these machining, what they're doing, or just let me know. And he says, you'll have my cooperation. So I started checking some of the things, and they had several, probably maybe 1,000 of the bolts. See the bolt? I don't. You know what the bolt looks like? Yeah.
6 or 8 inch long rod.
Yeah, and a firing pin in the center of it.
Yeah.
So I started checking, just, I wasn't doing much, and we had a surface plate there. I started checking, and the government blueprint started from the left-hand side and went all the way across, instead of starting in the center, going each way. And taking all of your what do you call them? Tolerances.
Yeah.
If you had to use all your tolerances, time you got over the firing pin here, you'd be off.
Yeah.
And that's the way some of them were.
Uh-huh.
So I goes to the foreman at that time, the grinding floor. I could see where coming back this way on them, they could wipe that out, and they would still have their firing pin in the right, somewhere near in the right place, enough so it wouldn't hurt too much. So the foreman of the grinder floor was Frank Hager. You remember him?
Mm-hmm.
At that time, and later on he went up in the in the office, but he was a foreman there then, and I had worked with him once. I'd like to tell you about that too sometime. But anyway, right now, he said, well, Penabaker, he said, you can't get by with that. He says, that's already got the flaming bomb stamped on there. And he's a government man, they half of them didn't know how to check anything, and they'd stamp his bolts, all the flaming bomb. Well, I says, Frank, I says, I had orders from Maynard Murray as superintendent that I says, I'll take the responsibility. You grind these back this way, and it wouldn't take much grinding. And I says, if you want to do it, I says, I'll go up and have Maynard Murray talk with you. Oh, well, he says, drag him over here. I had 2 or 3 pans of it. He says, drag him over here. And I says, I didn't come here to work to drag things around. I says, I said, you'll have to get somebody that kind of angered him a little bit more. But anyway, Frank Hager was a darn good man, good mechanic, a hell of a good mechanic. He the one story I'll have to tell about while we're talking about Frank Hager. Over in the parts machine shop, they had some not steering knuckles, but third arms that were the ones that they built for overseas, like in Australia, were built for right-hand drive.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so they wasn't selling too many of them. And the superintendent of the parts machine shop, he says, well, scrap all them out. He says, we don't need them. He said, just save maybe a couple of them because they're not selling any of them. They hadn't much more and cut them all up with a blowtorch before they got an order for a couple hundred of them. And so we had made a grinder to grind them with when we were making them there in the parts machine shop. And then they had a kind of a horn-like outfit on them. And this grinder wouldn't swing them without cutting the table. So we had the table cut too, and then fastened with a tape.
Sure, yeah.
With a pin. What do you call those pins? The tapered ones. Well, anyway, after they discontinued, thought they were going to make any more of them, they shipped that machine out, see, because they didn't want any more machines sitting around than they had to, on the income tax purposes. So there they didn't have a machine. So they gets this order for 200 of them. And the head of the department says, well, Penabaker says, you got to go over and talk to Frank Hager. He was the superintendent over in the crankshaft, and I forget what building that was then. Do you remember that or not? Well, anyway, I went over to talk with Frank, and he said I could use one of their grinders that would swing them. You know what I mean by swing?
Sure.
Yeah, and he says I could use one of the grinders if I would have it all put back together by the next morning. So it already worked 8 hours over in the parts machine shop. So I had to come over, and I got started a little early because they didn't have anybody working on that machine. And as I say, Frank Hager told me that he would like to have that machine back because production the next morning. So I worked all that night. I worked 23 hours straight.
Wow, long day.
And when I got home next morning, or whenever I got home, I can't remember just when I got home, but anyway, I worked 23 hours straight to get that machine back working for him. And I sat down and ate my breakfast, and when I got up, my legs were just like lumps of lead. But anyway, they got there, and during that night, Jim Hughes, and do you remember Jim Hughes? You hear of him? Well,
No.
He was one of the older men, and Emil Rohrbeck. They were foremen there in the crankshaft, and they come around about 11 or 12 o'clock that night, and Jim Hughes says, well, he says, you're not going to get these all out. He says, you're not even through roughing them out. I says, I don't do any roughing on this job. I says, when I knew I was coming over, I had the lathe man over in the parts machine shop cut that diameter down to just a few thousandths. So I says, all I have to do is practically go down there and touch them with that wheel.
Yeah.
And, but he thought I had to rough all them.
And then do it again.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we got them done.
Yeah.
But this government work, of course, after in 1941, after they shut the productions down, they had all kinds of foremen and everything, and they'd come over there in the gun plant. They would stand around in groups talking. They couldn't even read a 6-inch scale, but yet they still kept them on and paid them their. Maybe you was it.
No.
Well, anyway, I could see where I wouldn't get too far if I stayed there. And Maynard Murray had already gone up on the 37. They built a 37. And let's see. Yeah, Corbin.
Elmer Corbin?
Elman Corbin. He was he got to be superintendent. And so I told him, I says, he had a foreman under him was named Bealby. You remember him? No, well, anyway, I told him both. I says, I'm going to go back over and I says, I can get along maybe a little bit better back in the main tool room. Because they'd already told me they wanted me back over there.
Oh, okay.
And, well, he says, well, I and Bealby are going on a vacation for 2 or 3 weeks. He says, if you'll run the place here while we're gone, he says, well, I'll give you a discharge. So that's when I left the 20 millimeter plant and went back over in the main
Over in the tool
tool.
room.
Yeah.
Now, had the parts machine shop been disbanded or gotten rid of at that
Oh,
point
yeah,
in time?
yeah, in 1952.
Okay.
Yeah, they built a whole plant, somewheres around Swartz Creek or anyway, over near Flint
Yeah,
somewheres.
yeah.
And they will take care of parts for all General Motors cars.
All right.
They were all right doing that, see, and that just disbanded.
Mm-hmm.
The fact is, the management there at Olds, they come down and they told the foreman and myself, they says, we're not getting rid of this here because of, you didn't, we've been very well satisfied the way this place has been run.
Mm-hmm.
So then, I thought I had to hold my wife's cane. She has a cane every once in a while. Hooked on. So, get back, the first time I come to Lansing to work, I come to work at the Rio, in the Rio tool room.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and George Rosie was head of the tool room at that time. Well, a fellow named Deacon was superintendent, but George Rosie was general foreman. And I had a chance to go out on this program out in
Yeah.
San Francisco.
Yes.
And so I went in on that, and I was out there about 9 months. I was out there about 9 months, and I come back here, as I was telling you before. And
Do you by any chance know what we made during World War One?
well, do you know George Halpin?
No, I don't.
I don't know whether he's still alive or not. He's one of the older ones.
All right.
He's got the same number of years I have.
All right.
Him and George not Anderson, but Harrison, George Harrison.
All right.
You know him? Do you?
No, I don't know
No.
either of those two fellows.
There's three of us that I know of that all have. In fact, is this George Harrison has a tenth of a year longer than I have.
All right.
But all of his time was spent right in the main tool room working on one kind of work.
All right.
And of course, he spent some time in the Army. And
Yeah, we're having trouble figuring out what we made during World War One.
yeah,
So that's why it would be nice if somebody remembered that.
yeah.
It's going to be
I
tough.
can't because I wasn't here.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I didn't take the trouble to find out.
Well, you had no interest.
All I was looking at when I first come was that new building.
Yeah, with the big concrete posts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And boy, it had a nice shower room and
Oh, yeah.
well, I never seen anything like that before because I had worked at one place out in Washington a short time.
Yeah.
That when you went to the men's room, you had to go and you had a rail here and a stream running down here.
Yeah.
And that was in Cosmopolis, Washington.
Yeah, my lord.
And
And that was you had to go across that, or what did you?
No, you
just
you
used
sat
it.
on that and done your business right over
Right
that
over the stream?
Yeah, oh yeah,
Oh, my goodness.
yeah. And of course, that was outside of this Grays Harbor Commercial Company. They Grays Harbor, you know what I mean? That'd be a harbor come up in here. Holcomb was here, and I can't think of another name. It was over across the entrance. So then clear back to this end was Grays Harbor Commercial Company, they call them. They made boxes.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, they didn't have any cartons. They wasn't making cartons.
Yeah.
They'd make a bunch of these, saw them out the right width and everything, and run them through a stamper with a salmon on them, and then they had a machine that would bind them with wire and they'd ship them up to Alaska, to ship salmon out. They didn't have cartons at that time. Well, that was the Grays Harbor Commercial Company. I worked there a short time, and they paid your wages in silver. When I quit there, I had 64 silver dollars. I had to get. And they had their own mess hall, own chefs, and boy, they had some good ones too. They knew how to. I think they fed around 1,200 people there every day.
Okay.
And at that, and then I just stayed there a short time, and then I went down to San Francisco and took this program.
Come back to after the war, Hoyt. What happened then? After World War II, where did you were still in the tool room, I assume?
Well, we when I was back in the tool room, we had they had to have a lot of special machinery made.
All right.
And they had what they call the machine builders. Of course, they were all of us was tool makers, and so when the war ended, they done away with that, the special machines.
Okay.
And let's see, who was remember Brian Athey?
Yes.
He was superintendent in the tool room at that time, and he told me, he says, they want one of my men over in the central inspection. He says, I know that you can do layout work, and because he says, I've seen you. I said, well, you probably haven't seen very much then. So he says, I recommended you. So I went over and I worked over in the central inspection. And at that time, they were right next door. 34, wasn't it?
Mm.
Was 34 right next door to 40?
Yeah, 34 or 38,
Yeah.
whichever side you were on.
Well, it was on
34 is on the west side.
west side.
Yeah, okay.
They had the big plate in there. You know what I mean by the big plate?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And so I went over there, and that was very nice work. You'd get a chassis set up in car position on that big plate. And then, of course, you had holes that were vertical that had to be checked across that chassis.
Okay.
So they had arms here that very accurately slid along the edge of that big plate,
Oh, yeah.
and a scale here, see? So you would pick up your holes by using what we called a mouse. It would slide along that very accurately, along that column, come down on there and scratch a line.
Oh, yeah.
And then take whatever your dimension had to be to go over to the next hole. That's the way we checked that part of it. And then, of course, the holes on this side right here, they didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
Somebody.
We're okay.
Yeah. And then, of course, after if your chassis checked out all right, they were made by the O.B. Smith Company in Milwaukee. You've heard of them?
Yes.
Yeah. And if they checked out all right, they would bring a body over from Fisher that had been checked out. See the bolts already stuck in there from bottom. And if it set right down and all of them lined up, and then that was all right.
Yeah.
Then, of course, there was other things you did on that big plate, like checking the front end. What do you call them?
The alignment?
No, the names escape me. You remember the
A-frames and the...
No, the first cars that come out after the war, they looked like heck.
You're not thinking of the grill, are you?
Grill, yeah, that's the word I'm trying to, yeah, I'm getting fuzzy, yeah.
No, that's all right. You're fine.
Yeah. So we had we had set we got this chassis all checked out, it was all right, and we were checking out, see those grill was made in a lot of several pieces.
Yes.
And so we hadn't only got it about half put together, I guess it was, and Wolfram was the head of the old staff,
Right.
yeah. He came up and he was looking at it and he says, when you get that all put together, that grill, he says, I want it brought over to my office. Well, I says, how are we going to get that chassis in your he looked at it as if to say, don't be funny, but he says, I know, he says, you can set that up over on another plate, and then I want two of you to bring that grill over. And I said to the foreman in there, I says, well, you got a job on your hands. I says, you got to take a grill over to Wolfram's office. He says, you're the one that's going to have to, you and the son, I forget who the other fellow was. So we did. After we got it put together, we carried this quite a ways over there in the main office. And of course, it was made out of aluminum, or white metal or whatever it was. And I got over there in the main office. It was the first main office building they had built. And the security guard wasn't going to let us in.
Oh.
He says, you can't come in here with that thing. And I says, well, we got orders from Wolfram to bring it up in his office. Okay, he says, and I'll go up there and let you in.
Oh, okay.
Here's that old Wolfram way over here at a desk.
Yeah.
God, he had enough office, well, he had as much office space as you got right here.
Yeah.
And he was the only one in there. And he says, all right, boys, he says, set it down on the floor. He got on his knees and looked at it a while, and he says, that'll make a wonderful snow catcher. He says, take her back.
Really? That's all he wanted?
He just wanted to see how it looked when it all put together, yeah.
My
He didn't
goodness.
even touch a hand onto it. He got down on his knees on the carpet there about that thick.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever been up there or not. Yeah. Well, anyway, let's see that. Yeah, that was Wolfram. Yeah. I was going to say that was Skinner, but it wasn't. It was Wolfram. And let's see, the next man was Harold Metz. You remember him?
Yeah.
Yeah. He's the one that designed the Tornado. I happened to set it the same. You see us? What was it? With the high seniority, when they had the Quarter Century Club,
Mm-hmm.
they had a table to take 8. They always set us right there with a general manager like Wolfram and the head sales manager and a few of them, and Harold Cutlery, remember him?
Yes.
Yeah. And well, anyway, I happened to sit right next to Harold Metzel, but they hadn't made him
No, he was still chief engineer.
chief engineer.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I knew what he was doing with the Tornado, and got talking. He says, "Well, don't put too much faith in that." He says, "That won't go across very good." It so happened that it did go across good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they all adopted that front wheel drive and all this and that. And that's, so I don't know. I think it was just about, let's see, it wasn't only a couple of years after that they made Metzel.
Mm-hmm.
Then who was after him?
Belts.
Who?
John Belts.
Oh yeah. Now this general manager that they made, and he only lived a short time afterwards.
Baker.
Who?
John Baker.
No,
Oh.
I was talking with Helen with him.
Oh, you're thinking of Sanchez?
Yeah, one come from South America.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
Let's see, that was the last time I seen Helen. She
Okay.
invited me down to that party, and
That was 80,
was you down there?
83 or 84,
Yeah.
must have been, yeah.
Yeah, and I know he was there. He gave a little speech,
Mm-hmm.
and but he died shortly after
Yes.
that. I don't know
He
how.
left shortly and went to the Saturn project first and then died.
Yeah, yeah.
So, when did you retire, Hoyt?
67.
67. Where were you when you retired? What were you doing?
I was, now I was telling you about being in the
Central inspection.
certain inspection.
Yeah.
But the fellow had been made foreman of that after Roadmaster
Yeah.
retired. Jay Tellier, did you know him?
No.
Well, anyway, him and I went to come to the Olds at the same time back in 1918, and we worked together a lot, getting that parts machine shop going and everything. So he didn't go out on government work like I did, and he stayed in there, and they made him first foreman and then general foreman.
Okay.
So he come back over there several times in the central inspection. He says, "I got to have Penabaker." He says, "Oh, you got to come back over there." So I says, "I don't want to go back in that greasy, dirty old mess over there." I says, "I can wear a white shirt and everything here in the central inspection and see everything we checked was all new. See, and we checked all kinds of different things." But he kept after me, and finally I did. I went back over there. That was in let's see. That must have been about 1949.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, 48.
So now the rocket engine was coming.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That I know they were making that what they call the Big Six.
Yes.
Yeah, and I owned one of them. They were a good car. But the first one they built after the war was the 47, and I had one of them.
Now, did you do some work then with the rocket engine? You mentioned the rocker shaft that you had done some work on.
Well, the rocker shaft went on the Kettering engine.
Yes, on the Kettering engine.
Yeah. I helped set up that plant.
All right.
That Kettering engine plant.
What kinds of things did you have to do there?
Well, as I say, after they discontinued the parts machine shop, they says you can go find yourself a job anywhere and we'll okay it.
And that was the Louis Church rocker shaft thing.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, so I was going to go to work for Jack. He was head of the machinery repair, but I didn't quite like that very well. So I got to talking with Jim Reinbold, who was superintendent of the. He was superintendent over all of the tool division at that time. But they have that split up now. But at that time he was the head of it, and he talked me into going over there, and that was in 52.
All right. Okay.
And I was over there probably a year and a half or something like that when Jim Reinbold owed me back over in the tool room. Okay. And that was when the Korean War started.
Yes.
So I was in on 3 wars. I shouldn't be around here today.
What kinds of things were you doing then during the Korean War, Hoyt?
Well, I more or less was on special assignment.
All right.
Skinner was still general manager or head of the and I had worked on special assignment for him on a few things, and during World War II. So he when there you had 3 plant. You had plant 2. That's the old Rhinebond Foundry, and then you had plant 3 was a jet engine plant.
Yes.
And at that time they only had the 3 plants and the main plant, and whenever they had something special, they kind of made me supervisor over all precision bearings.
All right.
We had this super precision. And those bearings could be a tolerance of a couple tenths, which none of them ever did. They always made them right down to zero. Then we had the ultra super precision.
Wow.
They were the ones like would be installed in the jig bore, like the Pratt and Whitney jig bore, Diva League, and you understand.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so they put that all in one department, and I had charge of that from them bearings from all of the other plants, and we would get boring spindles to rework and everything, and of course there was only a few plants in the country that would make bearings of that proportion, like Fafner, you heard of those, and MRC, Merrill Rockwell Corporation. They were all good bearings, and SKF, the Swedish Svenska Lager Fabriken. Fabriken means manufacturer. You talking?
No.
Well, anyway, and then of course the new departure too,
Yes.
and Timken and Excello. They all made pretty good bearings, and so whenever they wanted any bearings, they had to come over to the main tool room and have them installed, or else they had to get them in the main tool room.
Were you storing those bearings?
Oh yes, yeah, right there where in the do you remember Schellberg? Well, he was the one he was Swedish, and he had the charge of taking care of the micrometers, gauges, and all that.
Oh, yeah.
It was in his department
All right.
at that end, over in that corner of the tool room. And, I felt sorry for him. He was diabetic, and last time I seen him was over to the Lansing General Hospital. I went to see him, and I think he'd had one leg in. But he was a very, very good mechanic. He had worked for his either uncle or father over in Sweden, and this shop they had, they made dies for making fine copper wire,
For pulling?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this machine that wouldn't bore out that hole in the diamond.
Oh, yeah.
It would run days.
Oh.
It'd just go up and down a little bit. They had the diamond dust on there and on top of there, and it probably wouldn't take over a millionth part of an inch at a time. But anyway, it would go days before they'd get all the way through it. You know what they do now?
Laser.
Yeah, they go through there with a laser in no time.
That's right.
Yeah. So that's what he started out this. What did I say his name was? Schellberg. Schellberg.
Yes,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. But that was mostly what we done after the
Okay. That was during the Korean War.
Korean War, and
Follow along after that, then.
well, I spent the last 15 years
Right there.
right in the main tool room.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I worked for.
How did, over all those years, Hoyt, how did safety change that you saw out in the plant?
Well, all depends on what you did. Whoop, excuse me. there's a scar right there I never could get rid of.
Hmm.
And I got that by climbing up on top of they sent me over, I forget what part of the plant it was, and I had to climb up on this machine. See, when they brought me back over in building 40, they changed my classification. They changed the tool gauge and fixture repair. And the reason they did that is because they wanted somebody that they could send instantly out in the area without crossing demarcation line. See, and if all these men working out there under that classification, they were all some of them had served their apprenticeship as tool makers over to Rio and all over. See, and they didn't like the idea of a tool maker coming and doing their work.
Sure.
But still, they would call for somebody like that. I went. Did you know LG Ives?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Know any good of him? Yeah, he was. I worked for him for 15 years, and him and I had our little spats, but still we respected each other's. He was a very good mechanic. Well, anyway, he wanted me sitting right in front of his desk.
Mm.
So when that phone rang, that make him nervous when, huh?
He would point at you and send you.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
He didn't want nothing to do with it after he found out that they wanted somebody out in the area. Penabaker, go there, see. Mm-hmm. So I would go out, and I went out on the jobs, and I'd see at least a half a dozen men standing around, the hands in their pocket, not doing anything. There'd be machine repair man, and maybe a couple of tool gauge and fixture men that ought to be doing that work. And I could almost tell what they were saying. Well, there comes old Penabaker. He'll have it wired up in no time. Well, that was the idea was that when a machine went down, get that going for production, even though you did have to wire it up because it could be taken care of the next weekend. See, and a lot of them fellows, they didn't like to do that. So I had quite a lot of wiring up to do.
Well, did like back in 1918 when you came, did machines have guards on them?
Yeah, they had guards.
The belts and the gears and the...
Well, of course, most of the machines had overhead belts, They had the overhead
line shaft?
line shafts.
Oh?
Oh, yeah.
So that's the way that engine plant was run?
Well, no, there was two or three machines there that we got in the department where I was leader that they brought in there, and they had motors on.
All right.
Yeah, they didn't, but a good share of the machines were operating overhead line shafts.
Oh, all right.
They had one great big motor that would, you'd see that fella go over there and he'd push that lever over, and then pull it back like this there. Mm-hmm. See, they had to get it going.
Get it wound up.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And after that got going so fast, they'd pull that lever back over and then they'd.
Did they have any guards on those big belts? Or was that all open?
No, I don't think so. No.
Okay.
I just can't remember. Well, I guess some of them might have had.
Did people wear safety glasses?
No, they wasn't. There wasn't nobody wore safety at that time.
All right.
Yeah.
Safety shoes?
No, they didn't have them either.
All right.
They didn't have them go later.
Was the plant generally clean?
When we first started on that heavy 8 that I was speaking of, they didn't have any blowers to take the dust out.
Okay.
So this is all cast iron.
Yeah.
My God, you could write your name right like that.
Hmm.
And the only way you could exist was take a chew of tobacco.
Chewing tobacco?
Yeah. Well, everybody had to, but my gosh, you had to keep your throat moist.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I never liked like chewing tobacco.
Yeah.
But still, I know I went to my dentist to get one of these teeth pulled, and he says, "No, there's nothing wrong with that." He says, "The scrap tobacco, that's good for your teeth."
Oh.
And he says, "That'll clean your teeth." Yeah. And
Okay.
he said, "As long as you don't swallow a lot of it."
What did everybody do? Just spit it all over the place? Or?
Oh, yeah, any place they see a pile of cast iron or something, they would.
Well,
Yeah, but that didn't last too long. Finally, they got blowers around through, so they take that away. But
yeah,
when they first started, they didn't have them blowers.
I'll be darned.
And you could just see that darn cast iron dust right in the air.
Was the aluminum machining, was that wet? Do you remember? Did they have compounds or wet?
Not all, some of them did, and some of them didn't.
Okay.
They see now there was the crankcase and the water pump. The first ones they made had two water pumps, one on each side,
All right.
with a shaft going through and a spiral gear and to drive it.
All right.
Well, then they done away with the double water pump and had one big one.
Okay.
And I remember the machine the machine that water pump that it was big circular table on, and it threw aluminum all over. But anyway, it didn't hurt nothing.
Yeah.
They the way they finished I guess I've told you about how they molded these cast iron.
Yes.
Well, when they finished them, they had a what they call a baronizer. There was a shaft with rollers all the way around on it. You probably know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
And they would slowly go down. They'd put that on this single spindle machine, and it would slowly go down through there with the graphite on it. They would use graphite on there because graphite is a good lubricant as well as cutting. Graphite differs from molybdenum. Molybdenum will free anything up, but it does not cutting. Where graphite, after it once frees, it'll keep right on cutting. So, but anyway, they would run that down through there.
That was on the cylinder bore?
Yeah, on the cylinder bore.
Uh-huh. This is a recording of Hoyt S. Penabaker of 1112 Poxon Avenue, Lansing. The recording was made by Jim Walkinshaw at the Oldsmobile History Center on October 23rd, 1989. This is tape number 3 of 3 tapes. Okay, back to the machining of cylinder
Well,
bores.
that made a wonderful bore, and but they found out that by using this baronizer or that pack that made it a glazed finish.
Yeah.
And if they wanted to rebore that cylinder, they just couldn't do it.
It's too hard.
Too hard, yeah.
Oh.
So they, of course, they didn't make that Light 8. That was the 47A model.
Yeah.
They didn't make it on a couple of years, but an old ABC come along and
threw them all out.
Threw them all out. Yeah, yeah. And maybe he did a good thing. I don't know, but he brought blueprints, and he almost brought quite a lot of parts. We had to machine a few parts.
Yeah.
You know, as I was telling you before, right. I helped machine some parts for the first 10 pilot models.
For that air-cooled engine?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
What engine? Where did that engine go? Did we put it in one of our cars to try it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The experimental. Yeah. They also experimented with the Willis Knight too.
Oh, did they? The sleeve?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
They found out after they they had done what they had to do in the experimental and the engine. They sent it over to England, to the Royal, supposed to be the utmost or the best of the, and they couldn't wear that engine out.
Really?
Where they wear other engines out, they couldn't wear that out.
Interesting.
Yeah, and see, you had a, you know how they were
Oh, yeah.
constructed. You had a piston inside two
sliding sleeves, yeah.
and of course each one of these sleeves had its own little crankshaft, you know, and but they couldn't wear one of them out. After they went way beyond what the others wore out. They take one of this apart and they can still see the lathe marks. And these sleeves wasn't ground; they were just
turned.
Just turned. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. But the one thing about using that Willis Knight engine was it's all right if you're in a dealership or something to probably would have a fixture to put it together, but my neighbor, Frank Woodine, he was working in experimental at that time. I guess I told you he was driving a car in Milford, and he bought one of them just like company car, and he had it so long, and he had to do something. He had to take it apart. So it took about 6 neighboring fellows to put that thing together, because you got to have every one of those.
Yeah.
You have to lower all those pistons right down to a certain spot and get everything
all lined up.
Everything lined up. So that was one of the reasons that they didn't use it. Yeah. And they are also experimenting with a French rotary valve. You remember them, do you? They had a
long shaft.
Rotary valve. Yeah. Now, I've been asked a good many times about this quadri valve that they're making now.
The quad 4.
Quad 4.
Yeah.
And of course, they've been using them in European cars for quite a while. And that was one of the reasons that they were experimenting with this Willis Knight, is because they wanted to get rid of those two valves, tappet valves, they call them. And now here they've added 2 more on, and it's all right. If you do all of that machining very accurately, and want to pay the extra money to buy one of them, and if you've got a double garage, and just for satisfy your ego, have one of them along with your other car, it's all right. And then they do say that there's a fellow in our block there on Poxon, the doctor that bought one. He seems to have had very good results with it so far. I don't know how many miles he's got on it, but at the price you have to pay extra for one of those, see, you got 2 camshafts in it.
Right.
And then all of this timing is to be, no, there's a word I'm trying to think of. They got to be together.
That's right. It's got to be timed. It has to be timed.
Yeah, I know it, but there's a word there I'm trying to think of. Well, anyway, they I wouldn't say too much against it. They seem to be going over all right, selling, So I've been asked many good times, and I don't like to say anything against anything like that.
Hoyt, who do you think was the best supervisor you ever worked for over all those years?
Well, in general, this Frank Roadmaster was one of at the Olds.
Mm-hmm. How come? Why was he a good guy?
Well, he was this kind of a guy. I had 2 or 3 children, and while I was working for him, born, and maybe four. I had four altogether. Three daughters and a son. You know the son.
Yes.
Every time one of them was born, old Frank, he'd come up and he'd say, I don't know what the little fellers would like, but here's a bill.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the $10, $5 or $10 bill at that time was quite a lot. I never had any other foremen do that. But L.G. Ives was a good guy. He had a lot of quirks. For instance, after they would allow him to smoke in the plant. See, they didn't used to allow.
Oh, you couldn't smoke in the plant?
Oh my gosh! Up until World War II, you couldn't even smoke a pipe and walk across from Elm Street to Logan Street.
What did people do?
They just, what do you mean, what did they do?
Well, if a guy smoked, he had to smoke.
Well, they just had to go without until they had noon.
Really?
Yeah. Well, over to Rio, you heard of Richard Scott, haven't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was the head of the Rio. He wouldn't allow smoke any time in their where they played cards. And if you first time I went over there, was over there at that Rio. I see over on the other side of the street a lot of fellows lined up smoking cigarettes. And I asked somebody about it, and he says, "Well, hey, you smoke a cigarette on the other side of the street there, and you get canned."
Oh, retard.
So this L.G. Ives, when we had to change shifts at that particular time. In fact, they did right up until I retired, although I did have seniority, but afterwards they changed that so seniority men could stay out all the while. Well, anyway, he would sit there at his desk all evening sometime and do nothing but work crossword puzzles and smoke. And he'd have a tray of butts there. And now I smoked once in a while. I did at that time. I don't now, but I did at that time. Maybe one or two cigarettes a week or something, whenever I'd feel like it. But there was always a smoke. What do they call it?
Chain smokers.
Chain smokers, yeah. 3-4 packs a day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't see how that, just like, what was his name that, he was in that, Jackie Gleason. They claimed he smoked 3 of them a day.
How did they change Hoyt to the allowing smoking? What caused that to happen? The union get done?
Yeah. They and as long as it wasn't interfering with your work.
Okay.
And he was superintendent there in the main tool room when I worked in there during the war, and some of the fellows liked to have these calendars with a girl that didn't have too much on. Along the side of their machine, so they can glance at that once in a while. And he done away with that.
Oh, did he?
Oh yeah, he was very religious, and so a good many things happened like that. I was going to tell you about how many V8s we made.
Right.
We made this Northway engine.
And the heavy and the light.
Heavy and the light 8, and the Viking. And after the Viking, there was a Kettering engine, and the F-85.
Yeah.
Now this F-85, we didn't make the F-85, Buick made it.
Okay.
Yeah. And
we made the head.
Yeah.
The cylinder head.
Was that cast iron or
no, aluminum?
Yeah, I did. I just don't remember exactly right now. But it had a deficiency, the same as the Light 8 did. You see they cast that aluminum crankcase for that engine. See, that was all aluminum. They they cast it with this hardened cylinder, right in the position, right, proper position.
Okay.
And this was hardened cylinder was practically the right size. So all they had to do in the machining operation was after it would cool down, or after they all they had to do go in there with a hone and hone it up to size.
Okay, now that was for the cylinder bore or
Yeah,
for the crank bore?
Cylinder bore.
The cylinder bore,
Yeah.
okay.
And they had to go in there or they had to hone it. Well, they had the same trouble there because this sleeve was hardened and it couldn't be rebored. And then another problem they had with this Buick engine was that they had quite a lot that they had to throw out that had blowholes in, and it was time consuming to repair an aluminum hole. You had to build around it and use a blowtorch and all that. So the holes got busy in 1964, and they started the F-85. I guess they started calling it the Cutlass, didn't they?
Started calling them in 62, they called the first one.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And they could build the Olds could build that engine themselves for $35 less than the Buick.
And that was a cast iron engine?
Cast iron engine, all cast iron.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I had I had one of the 60s. That's when they started the F-85, 60. I had a 60, 61, 62, and the 60. I had four of them, one every year. The company car every year, and every one of them were good, very good cars. But they in cold weather they had hard to start. Reason for that, there was down in the what am I trying to think of? The starts the engine. What do you call it?
The starter?
Starter, yeah.
Yeah.
Down in the starter, there was some parts of that starter that wasn't compatible to aluminum when the aluminum was cold. Somebody found that out and they started replacing that part. They never had any more trouble. I never had any trouble on any of mine, for that matter. Of course, I didn't. Mine was in the garage most of the time in cold weather, but when they got down below zero, they just didn't start with that other. But after they found out what that was, they done away with that. But they still had that problem of that sleeve being hardened.
Yeah.
And if anybody wanted to rebore that, it just wasn't. They couldn't rebore it for another 5,000 or anything like that.
How about the V8 that was the Viking engine? Was that a pretty good engine?
Yes, it was. This same friend of mine, Frank Godin.
Yes.
He drove one quite a lot on the proving grounds.
Yeah.
And he said they performed wonderfully. But he was listening to one of them when it was idling, and it sounded just like as though he was missing a cylinder. Why they ever timed it that way, I don't know. That's what he said anyway. But he said it performed wonderfully down to Milford. Of course, later on, he was a project engineer. Well, that's what you was, wasn't it? Project?
Yeah.
Yeah. Where did you work?
I worked over in Billy Porty most of the time. I worked on manufacturing engineering things.
On the what?
Manufacturing engineering things.
In Building 40?
Uh-huh.
Oh, you was upstairs.
Upstairs.
Oh, yeah. I remember now. Yeah. I remember John Sawyer bringing you around. Yeah. Let's see now. I knew several people up there. Do you know Bob Adams?
From Adams Tool and Die?
Yeah.
I knew his son.
Yeah, his son has got charge over there now.
Yeah.
Bob is, oh, I guess he goes around there once in a while to,
See, was the Northway engine a good engine, Hoyt?
well, one of the things that give them a little trouble, they had a cone clutch.
Okay,
On the flywheel, there was cone.
yeah,
And let's see, that cone was covered with leather.
mm-hmm,
And every once in a while that would get out of ground and start vibration and everything. They'd have to get in there with a rasp and hold it on there and start up, kind of
grind it off,
grind
sorry.
it off high spots. And as a rule, it wasn't too well liked.
Yeah,
And the only reason that Olds bought it, or General Motors, whichever bought it, I don't know. One of the two of them paid for it. It was because there wasn't any other engines available at that time.
Yeah.
See, that belonged about 1915 or 16, I guess.
1916, yeah.
They bought it and used it until 1918 or 17 or 18, and then they started bringing the machinery
Yeah. Yeah.
up to this building. But it wasn't as well liked as a light V8. The light V8 was well liked.
Okay,
See, I was trying to think of the number. 44A620 was was what the Northway engine was.
Okay.
And then the one that they bought from Oakland used, it wasn't too hot. I did know some different people that bought some of them. They don't. But this 43A, the one that they bought from the Mason
yes,
engine company.
that's the four-cylinder?
Four-cylinder.
Yeah,
It was aluminum pistons, overhead valve, and the pistons were ground out around. It was one of the first engines I ever heard of that the pistons were ground out around. And the only reason that the Olds stopped using it was after Duran had started over there. He owned the biggest amount of shares in that Mason engine, or that Mason engine company. And the Olds didn't like the idea. They were on logger ends. They didn't like the idea of buying that engine from him. That's the reason they quit making it. And they were only, what's the old expression?
yeah.
They're biting their tongue.
Bite the hand that feeds you.
Yeah.
How about trucks? Remember 1919,
Well,
the economy truck?
Yeah, this 43A was in that truck.
Okay,
And,
same engine?
same engine.
Okay,
And Helen early running quite an article in the Teen magazine or whatever magazine was out at that time, explaining that truck. But she didn't explain too much about the engine.
do you remember where it was made?
What, the truck?
Yeah,
Made right there at the Olds.
in one of the older buildings?
Yeah, in the old brick building.
Okay,
You probably don't remember the old brick building.
like building 10 or?
Yeah. That's where the original assembly line was, I guess,
All right,
in the old brick building. That's where that truck was built.
that have a regular assembly line?
Yeah, had a regular assembly line. They were right next to the stamping plant,
Okay,
across the aisle.
yeah, all right. Did we make the box for the back end? Whatever went on the back of the truck?
I don't remember where that was made. That could have been made over in the wood shop or somewhere. I don't know. I just
Long time ago.
I just don't remember where that was made, but they were a very sturdy truck. You couldn't wear one of them out.
Yeah,
And with that four-cylinder Mason engine in it, and they held up wonderfully.
yeah,
They had overhead valve,
yeah.
and I say the one of the first ones that ground the piston out around. That was very good because they would round piston would round itself up.
Yeah, when it got hot. Yeah. Well, what do you think? You think we pretty well covered the waterfront for the first time around?
Yeah, I think so. I was trying to think. Oh yeah, they in that same parts machine shop we started in the old building, their old brick building. They also had a line in there where they overhauled engines. They were building, for that matter.
All right.
If anybody that wanted an engine, they would go ahead and build it.
They would build up
Yeah, and we were building they would build a light V8 in Oakland. I don't think it become Poundygate at that time yet. And 43A
the
Mason,
Mason.
yeah, they would build any one of those three. I don't know whether they would. I don't remember ever seeing them building that, but they would either overhaul some, and they had 2 or 3 men there. That's all they did is. Let's see now. Maybe you would know. Do you know Fred David?
No.
Didn't know him. He was a very good motor man, and let's see. Frank Russell. Did you know Frank Russell?
Oh.
Right.
All before my time.
Your time, about when did you start there?
I didn't start till 53.
53, Yeah.
The old brick building that you mentioned, was that the building that was right next to Division Street?
No, that was the old office building.
Okay, but the office building ran south there.
Yeah.
And this was further to the east? The brick building would have been?
Well, as you went down this way,
Yeah, down Division Street.
no,
Down
uh,
Elm Street?
Williams. Again.
Okay, down William, yeah.
Yeah. This. So what I'm trying to figure out for you now is there was one outfit built in a horseshoe shape, brick building. On this end of it, upstairs,
Yeah.
was a service office.
All right.
That's where I met my wife.
That was kind of at the front end of the plant, so to speak.
Yeah.
All right.
And there was a garage down below it, took care of any of the cars from
All
the
right.
service department. Well, then along this side was the warehouse.
Okay.
That was the only parts warehouse in the plant at that time.
All right.
Later on, the one way over, what building was that?
62, you're saying?
62,
Yeah, later,
yeah.
yeah.
And then-
So this was an L-shaped building, kind of an L shape? Okay.
Yeah. On that side was the warehouse, and this side was the service department.
Okay.
And over on this side, next to the old office building, was, let's see. Then anyway, when you got down to that end of it,
Yeah,
you crossed the alley there into
into the press plant,
yeah.
yeah. And now, was that the same building that the truck was made in?
Yeah.
Okay.
The one,
The long,
yeah.
okay.
Now, they didn't have too many men working on that, but anyway, they built several of them. They were well liked, very well liked, and if Helen happened to have any of the material, she's got about most everything.
Yeah, we've got a lot of photographs of that and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Just didn't know where it was built too much.
Yeah, it'll show that truck, and it was very well liked. And we had one of them that we used there in the department, and we'd go get things with and everything.
Sure.
I used to like to drive that. The names kind of escape me, but anyway, you wouldn't know.
Yeah, that's all right. That's all right.
And we had an occurrence there with that light V8. The head of the service department, of course, that was what this parts machine shop was under the manager. He had two engines. He had one that was in there all the while in this line I was telling you about, being checked and worked on, and then he would drive a heck out of the one he had in his car, and then he'd bring his car in, and they'd change engines, and then he'd have a new engine in there.
Oh, you kept rebuilding it for him.
Yeah, and so this timekeeper noticed that, and he reported it to the head management or the main office. So this foreman of mine, he was in on it too. He had to be in order to tell him then what to do. And he almost lost his job. And I think the general manager later lost his job on that account too. Well, they wouldn't. He was getting one free engine.
Sure.
Yeah. As I say, if we have missed anything today, and you can think of anything else, be glad to.
That's fine, Hoyt.
Be glad to come here again or give me a call or anything.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I will shut that off. I'll get you to sign our little release form here, and we'll